Report story. Chapter 7 Armored Hearts. I already told you, Iida, I don't mind. But it's a 7-hour drive each way, isn't it? Ochako huffs as she opens the takeout box in her hands. It is, yes, but I usually break it up in at least one direction. Tenya scrunches his eyebrows together over the rim of his glasses as she pops a piece of daifuku into her mouth. She answers, rather unbecomingly, around the mochi-coated strawberry. Last night, I stayed at UA so I could visit with Present Mike and Eri. And the time before, I stayed at Mina and Toru's on my way back. She finishes chewing and swallows, shooting Tenya a half-apologetic look in answer to his disapproving stare. I've also stayed at other agencies if there's official business in progress or at the Todoroki house. She shrugs. Like I said, I really don't mind. Tenya clears his throat as she hands him a piece of dessert, which he waves away. Ochako happily obliges, shoving the treat into her mouth with gusto. All I'm saying is, he adjusts his glasses on the bridge of his nose. A little tell, Ochako knows, that he is somewhat nervous about what he's about to say. Maybe next time, I could visit you. Ochako's mouth drops open, displaying her half-chewed food. Uraraka, I really must insist you stop chewing with your mouth open. Sorry, Iida, I just. She chews and swallows before allowing a bright smile to take hold of her. I would really love that. Tenya returns the smile and gives a curt nod. Maybe you could even stay with me overnight, so you don't have to drive back. It would be so nice to have someone at the house with her that Ochako nearly bursts from the sheer concept. The house feels so large and lonely with just her there. That would be lovely, Uraraka. Ochako is delighted by the prospect, not only because it would be great to feel another person's presence at home, but also because it indicates that Tenya's occupational therapy is going well. Not long ago, the idea of traveling seated, whether driving or riding the train, for anything more than an hour would have resulted in excruciating pain and stiffness in his leg. She wants to ask about it, but she's too afraid of souring the cheerful mood. She is about to change the subject when her phone begins buzzing insistently in her pocket. She pulls it out to check the caller, hopeful she'll be able to hang up and return her attentions to her friend, only to pause. Because this does not seem to be a call she can ignore. Ochako flicks her eyes up to Tenya as if to ask permission and he gestures for her to answer. Of course, as a hero himself, he understands that sometimes socializing is not the priority. Uravati, she answers, holding her breath just a little as she waits for whatever briefing is about to come. It's good to hear your voice, Uravati. Thanks for picking up. Of course, I figured it was important if you were calling. What can I do for you? 13. The retired rescue hero has called Ochako before the situation makes it to the news. Though they are no longer active, 13 has been asked to help with a natural disaster in Hokkaido, close to where they live, now promoted stories. You'll also like The Hero's Return MHAXJJK ongoing 116K 1.7K in Quad, Izuku. Midoriya, after being betrayed and killed, vanishes leaving hurt people behind. After 2 months and a hack, he come back, changed. How will the class After all, Omfluke 11.4K 802. Will edit once I'm free. N. This is a work of fiction, and any similarity with other works is purely coincidental. Excuse grammatical errors and misspellings, Eng. Feelings. Izawa. X-Reader 57.4K 1.3 KRE posting. This until I edit it, sorry if it's not good, it's my first time writing a story. You enroll at UA and you have multiple quirks you are really good at using, why? Free. Oni Shots 150K3K. This is a collections of free X readers. Requests on this are now closed. Not all heroes wear capes. Some just have 8.43.3K 1.4 Kelo. Everybody. This is a suicidal, depressed Deku book with Dadmic. Will their bond grow? Will Mike fuck up? Will Izuku try to kill himself? Find out yourself. Number 1 radio. Finished. 28.6K 508 tilde. He save all of them, just a smile plastered on his face before disappearing through the wind. Mirko X Shy Male Reader 177K 1.1 Key. Don't own MHA. I hope you enjoy the story I made. An avalanche has buried 2 small villages in the shadow of Daikokuyama. Local heroes and residents will require as much assistance as possible, and quickly. 13 is currently organizing on the ground, there. I was hoping I could rely on you to organize some reinforcements and get them here. Ochako stands, already pulling on her coat to head out. Of course. I'll arrange everything. How many heroes? As many as you think we'll require. I trust your judgment. To hear her former idol and teacher say that sends a warm flush of pride through Ochako's whole body. I'll arrange transports from Musudafu, Tokyo, and Kyoto, Ochako says, and after a brief farewell, the 2 heroes hang up. She turns to her host, an apology already on her lips, only to find Tenya bowing to her. Please be safe, Uraraka, and let me know if there is anything the Adadan agency can do to assist. Actually, she says, pulling him into a hug he is not at all prepared for. If you have any heat-based quirk users, I'd love for them to be prepared for transport. Of course. Ochako arranges the helicopters first, making sure she knows exactly how many seats she can fill. Then, without wasting any time, she begins calling in favors. Dynamite and Tetsu Tetsu are 2 of her first calls. Then Tsukuyomi and Vantablack for search and rescue. She knows Comicman will come with Katsuki, and even though he's not well suited to the actual mission, it will be good to have people who can coordinate victims in emergency housing and triage. She knows he's experienced enough in the field to be good at that. She calls Pinky, too, and Mina, though she does not actively work as a hero these days, is all too happy to help with Toru in the background shouting she'll take on some of the administrative work. Ochako also places a call to her old mentor Ryuku, but the woman is currently out of the country, just as Hawks is unavailable due to other work. Mount Lady and Present Mike wouldn't be very helpful, but she does call in Hound Dog, who is all too willing to lend a hand, or a nose, as the case may be. She tries to call Izuku, but his phone goes straight to voicemail. Finally, as she is about to board a helicopter in Tokyo alongside Vantablack and several interns from Adadan, she calls the Todorokis and gets Shoto. Of course, Uraraka, we'll both be there. She's about to say thank you and hang up when she decides instead to greedily ask another favor. Todoroki, I tried to call Deku, but he isn't answering his phone. There's a long pause and for a moment Ochako is afraid she's offended Glacial Blaze, one of the most useful heroes on her roster for a mission like this. But then, in true Shoto fashion, he says blankly, I will collect him on our way to the transport. And he hangs up satisfied that she's done all she can for now. Ochako gathers herself into the helicopter and begins briefing her subordinates on their way to Hokkaido. Danger sense sings quietly, a dull throb at the back of his head, the closer they get to their destination. As they pass over the villages of Nikki and Ikagawa, he can see the devastation wrought by the avalanche and he hopes there is enough time to save as many people as possible. Everything is a flurry of activity as Izuku steps off the helicopter. Even from a distance, the camp the heroes have established is impressive. Immediately, Kriti is running toward the nearest supply tent, backpack full of food to restore her lipid supply bouncing heavily on her back, to see how she can help. Izuku hasn't been part of a coordinated rescue mission like this in a long time. He spends most of his days corralling villains. The fact that Ochako has been able to pull so many heroes and interns off duty to help is truly awe-inspiring. He watches her, floating mid-air as she tethers herself to the ground with a grappling line, shout directions to teams of 3 and 4 she has organized herself before they take off. A survival pack attached to each of them, in search of civilians in their designated zones. It takes more effort than he would like to admit to tear his eyes away from her in order to begin his own work. But watching her confidently direct dozens of other heroes makes him feel like a kid again, impressed by her calm and collected nature in the face of destruction, her determined assertion that they are going to save as many people as they can. It's frigid and dark, thick storm clouds blotting out the sun as the heroes search for people to save. Visibility is almost non-existent through the swirling snow and sleet. Izuku uses Black Whip to pull open doors and move debris. Working alongside Glacial Blaze is a nostalgic treat as Shoto melts away ice and snow to reveal the battered homes of Ikagawa. They've each been given a communication device with a location transmitter, and a survival pack with rations, a first aid kit, emergency flare, and 2 silver space blankets. It's grueling work, and even with his gloves on, Izuku can feel the way his fingers tingle against the frozen air. Despite the discomfort, it is the first time Izuku has felt truly useful in a long time. Like he has made the decision to be a hero for himself rather than in acquiescence to someone else's whims or ideals. He feels like the Deku who can do it from UA, and the sensation brings a smile to his face, though it is hidden beneath the metallic mouthguard of his costume. Eventually, as darkness descends, Shoto must rest his hands, the fire taking its toll on his body as he battles the elements. He gives Izuku his emergency pack as the latter continues his work in order to retreat to their base camp to recharge. Izuku just keeps searching. He finds families huddled together, shivering in kitchens, before passing them off to other heroes who can help them make their way to the small city of tents a few kilometers away. He gives one of his packs to a young couple who were in good condition beyond being hungry. They were lucky in that the fire they had burning in their living room never went out, so they're relatively warm for now. As long as they move quickly, they should be able to make it to the camp without incident. Afraid of the encroaching nightfall and poor visibility, Izuku instructs them to walk to the edge of town and use the flare gun to signal a hero who can transport them to safety. As a precaution, he places his communicator around the young man's neck so they can be tracked if necessary. And still Izuku looks, even as his fingers and toes go numb, even as the tip of his nose turns to ice behind Deku's mask, he continues searching. Because protecting the innocent, helping them with a smile, even if they can't see it, is still all Deku knows how to do. Ochako doesn't know how long she's there. Time is both meaningless and imperative in situations like these. She knows they have precious few hours to help those in need, but the seconds tick by without care as she rushes to brief everyone on their specific duties, to ensure the rescuers stay safe and do not become victims themselves. And once that is done, she leaves the base camp coordination in the capable hands of Invisible Girl, who is extremely visible in her bright fuchsia ski suit, and 13, who gives Ochako a reassuring pat on the shoulder as the zero-gravity hero takes off through the snow and sleet to do what she is best at. Save people. And it is grueling work, her thighs and stomach burn with the effort of overusing her quirk. Her gloves, which cover everything but the puffy pink pads of her fingers, offer as much warmth and protection as is feasible, but it's still not enough, and Ochako ends up tucking her hands into her armpits between houses to keep them from going totally numb. They are lucky, she knows, that the evacuation is going so well. While many of the homes were covered by snow, most of them are still fully, or mostly, intact, shielding their residents from the heavy precipitation and keeping them at least somewhat protected from the elements. That does not mean the people they are trying to save are not vulnerable. She finds one young girl with a nasty left tibia fracture that may never heal properly. An elderly couple have succumbed to the cold, holding hands next to their empty hearth. She finds beloved family pets crushed beneath snowdrifts and hound dog smells so much death in one house he advises them to ignore it for now. The mission to seek out corpses will come later, after they've saved as many of the living as they can. Still, Ochako is proud of her friends and her colleagues. Admiration burns in her chest as she watches young interns rise to the challenges she sets for them. It is an incredible thing to see so many heroes, most of whom have not worked collectively before, band together and move in tandem with one another to save lives. She sees the bright glow of One for All on multiple occasions and tries very hard not to allow herself to look for Izuku against the luminous background of white that blankets everything. Her communicator bursts to life each time survivors arrive at the base camp. 13 has helpfully provided a roster of all the registered residents, and Invisible Girl and Comicman mark each person off as they are accounted for. Ochako knows they will not be able to find everyone tonight, but as the total number climbs ever higher, she feels that warm spark of hope in her chest and her hand instinctively reaches for a compartment on her utility belt that has been empty for a long time, but is once again occupied. Eventually, though, Ochako must decide whether it is worthwhile to continue searching in the deepening dark. She can see the toll their efforts have taken on the heroes, everyone's shivering even as they continue their search. It's been nearly an hour since Hound Dog smelled anyone new for them to excavate. And the darkness will soon be impenetrable, with no moon or stars to guide them. The light quirk users she's brought in will need to rest. She can see Firefly's golden body flickering, probably a result of exposure to the cold, and Lumen's bright white radiance has dimmed to that of a 60-watt bulb over the preceding hours. And as much as she wishes it wasn't her call to make, Uravity presses her finger to the communicator and her voice rings in the ears of every hero wearing their matching devices. This is Uravity, calling off search for the night. Return to base camp to check in over. Though Ochako is loath to admit it, she's relieved when she walks into the makeshift encampment. She can see how many villagers they've managed to retrieve from their homes, grateful smiles on their faces as they clutch styrofoam cups of tea, huddling close under emergency blankets near fires lit by the quirk-based flames of their heroes. The count looks good, over 85% of the population accounted for, and still more people currently in triage or receiving lower-level medical care who have not yet checked in. It feels like something good, and a sense of accomplishment washes over Ochako as warm as any bonfire. And she can admit that at least some of the peace she feels is because of all the old classmates and colleagues she sees huddled close together, eating warmed cans of beef stew and chicken curry as they laugh and catch up with one another. Ochako even allows herself to relax on an unoccupied cot for a few minutes before an emergency flare bursts to life in the darkness. Immediately and without thinking, she takes off in the direction of the distress signal, Dynamite and Kriti close on her heels. And when they arrive, it is to find a young couple huddled close together in the snow, the beginning's frostbite just barely visible on the tops of their noses and fingers. They hold the flare gun together in their shaking grasp, and Ochako notices a hero's communicator with the tracking beacon activated blinking furiously around one of their necks. As Kriti sheds her parka and Dynamite begins pulling warm blankets from the skin of her back, Ochako taps her communicator. 13. This is Uravati. Update on heroes return to camp. 13 must recognize her urgency because they respond before Ochako even has time to suck in another breath. All but one accounted for, Uravati. Deku has not yet checked in. Roger, she says, her eyes fixed on the little blinking light of Izuku's communicator before gazing out at the swirling darkness beyond, hoping for even the smallest green spark to light the landscape. But nothing pierces the shadows and Ochako's heart sinks into her shoes. Chapter 8 Topography. At some point, Izuku realizes the only sounds he can hear are the howling of the wind and the crunching of the snow beneath his feet. And it is then he concedes perhaps giving away his communicator was not the smartest idea he's ever had. In the moment, it had seemed like a good way to ensure the young couple could be found in the increasing swirl of snow. But he's well beyond his designated zone, now, and as he attempts to make his way back to where he's supposed to have been this whole time, he becomes acutely aware of the worsening conditions and the fact that all the light seems to have been snuffed out of the world. He can't feel the skin of his legs under his suit anymore, and the bitter wind is blowing the sleet into the slats of his mouthpiece. When he reaches up to try and clear it, he realizes it's mostly frozen over, which explains why it feels as though he's breathing through a straw clogged with wet tissue paper. Izuku knows he should have been paying closer attention as the dark increased and his colleagues apparently retreated. He was just so focused on the work, on checking and double checking and then rechecking again that he'd reached everyone he could. When had everyone left him behind? He tries to active one for all and leap, but the muscles of his legs quiver and give out. He ends up on his knees in the snow, cursing himself for not recognizing how long he'd been subjected to the elements sooner. One for all has kept him warmer than most, but even that artificial comfort has its limits, apparently. He remembers his purple toes in the ocean when he visited his mother and he winces, hoping not to find them in a similar state once he gets his shoes off. And now Deku is running out of options as he feels the first thin tendrils of panic snaking their way around his heart, pulling at the fervent muscle until it skitters and jumps in his chest as if to ask, "How will you get out of this one, hero?" The voice sounds suspiciously like Stain and Izuku tries very hard not to think too deeply on that. Instead, he decides it's best to seek shelter first and formulate a plan after. The weather is becoming increasingly ominous, and he hasn't had water or food in who knows how long. His brain and tongue feel fuzzy and without any stars to guide him, he's unsure of the exact direction of their base camp. He finds a house he'd cleared at some point, a small cabin that was clearly only used seasonally because there's nothing inside except furniture. The cupboards are bare, there are no linens, and the space next to the fire for kindling is empty. Still, at least he is out of the wind. But without anything to do, it becomes increasingly obvious to Izuku how very cold he is. His body shivers, occasionally twitching violently as he shirks off the remaining survival pack. His teeth chatter behind the faceguard and he tries to remember the last time he could feel his fingers or toes only to realize he can't. Reluctantly, Izuku peels away the hood of his costume and finds it's soaked through. His hair is wet, little icicles dangling off some of the ends. When he inspects his mouth guard, he grimaces, wondering if he'll have to order a new one. Even if he doesn't, May is already going to scold him, he's sure, because his prosthetic arm moves sluggishly when he flexes the wrist. The piece is meant for use in all types of weather, and the realization that it's begun to freeze up makes his carelessness all the more apparent. The only problem with being inside the cabin is it's dark as pitch. Unless One for All is activated, which, he finds, makes his teeth chatter even harder than they already are, he can't see his own hands even in their white gloves. It's as if the snow itself outside gave off some ethereal illumination, like it glowed from beneath or within just enough for his eyes to adjust to the night. But inside the cabin, all that light is missing and Izuku is trapped in the darkness. He fumbles around with the backpack, but he can't find a lantern or a flashlight. His trembling hands do, at least, find a water bottle and the rations bars, which he devours greedily. Still shivering and cursing his single-minded and blinding focus, Izuku wraps the two metallic silver blankets over his shoulders and he waits. Out of the elements, he has every confidence he will survive just fine until morning, so long as there isn't a second avalanche. He may be hypothermic by the time he makes it back to camp, but he's survived much worse, and hopes to do the same this time. He must doze off, then, which is not all that surprising, because the next thing he knows, he's jarred awake from a pleasantly warm dream by the door of the cabin bursting open. Silhouetted against the ethereal glow of the snow is someone with giant, luminescent green eyes. For a moment, Izuku is certain it's a villain. That Deku is about to be slaughtered in a remote cabin in the shadow of a Hokkaido mountain because he forgot to wear his thermals. But then the person lifts the green eyes away and he realizes they're goggles. And she says, "Do you know how long it took me to find you?" Ochako is soaked, the knees of her boots are crusted over with a thin sheen of ice and her cheeks and nose are pink and chapped from the wind. But she's never felt more relieved in her entire life. She pulls the door closed behind her and tugs a lantern out of her pack, setting it on the floor as she turns it on so she can shed her hat, gloves, and boots. She's grateful for the clunky support pieces, especially because of the additional insulating layer she's had made to fit inside them for work in extreme conditions. Even after trekking through the snow again to find Izuku, her feet are warm and dry based on the way Izuku is hunched on the floor, looking every bit the drowned puppy she's sure he feels like. She's going to assume he can't say the same. Why or YUH here? He's trying very hard not to stutter as his teeth clack together, but it's a losing battle. He supposes he deserves the exasperated roll of Ochako's eyes. I wasn't just gonna leave you out here to freeze. He frowns. What about YU? I'll be fine, she says. I've had a warm meal and some time to recharge. You, on the other hand. She never finishes the thought, as if doing so would be a waste of her time. She walks over to him, and lifts the space blankets away to inspect the state of his costume, pinching her brows together when she realizes he looks like he's just stepped out of a swimming pool. You need to get that off, she says, and he flinches. Get what off? Your clothes. She bends down over her backpack and starts pulling out more blankets. She has some of the same silvery ones he's using, but it appears she also has a few thick woolen ones, and Izuku wonders if they're from Kriti. When he doesn't move, Ochako chastises him. I'm serious, Deku, get that costume off now, you're going to freeze. Izuku isn't sure it's possible for his face to get any redder than it already is from being frozen, but it sure feels like his cheeks are turning a traitorous shade of crimson as he contemplates the humiliation of stripping in front of his one-time best friend and permanent love interest. No way can he do that. Uraraka, I can't. Sure ya can, it's easy. She looks up at him, concerned, and his blush deepens infinitely, unless you need help. Are you hurt? And no, he shouts, and her initial surprise turns into an amused little giggle at his outburst. Sorry, I just mean I don't have anything on. Underneath. He turns away, too embarrassed to look at her. You mean you do your hero work, Commando? She asks. Izuku buries his face in his good hand and shakes his head furiously back and forth. I am mean, it's only underwear. No other layers. You didn't wear your winter gear. I don't have any winter gear, he clarifies. When she just keeps staring at him as if he's sprouted an additional limb from his back, he continues, one for all usually keeps me pretty warm. She rolls her eyes at him. Well, it doesn't appear to be helping ya, now, so I'm afraid it's underoo time for Japan's #1 hero. Uraraka. He moans, embarrassment lacing its way through his body like it's being woven into the very fibers of his being. She giggles again. I'll turn around, Kay. Promise not to look. And she does, though that's as much to hide her own embarrassment as to protect Izuku's pride and modesty. Because the thought of watching him undress makes her heart and stomach do strange and unnecessary things, like they're waging war inside her body. She can hear him shifting, hears the thunk of his leg gauntlets and the wet slap of his costume as they hit the floor. She hears the shifting of the strange, metallized fabric of the space blankets as he pulls them around his bare body. Okay, he says, quieting with his teeth still chattering. She turns around and quickly hands him two of the wool blankets Momo gave her before picking up his costume and draping it over a chair to hopefully facilitate a slightly faster drip drying process. By the time she's turned back around, Izuku's sufficiently cocooned himself within the blankets, though his shoulders still shake. Thank you, Uraraka. She lets out an exasperated breath. What were you thinking? Giving away your tracer and communicator like that? Izuku ducks his head, smiling ruefully. It seemed like a good idea at the time. Ochako's glare is intimidating as she says, I guess I should tell you they made it to camp okay. Some minor frostbite, but they should recover well. Frostbite? He asks, surprised. You didn't even notice how bad the weather was getting, did ya? She lets out an exasperated sigh. You really need to stop trying to get yourself killed. It makes it very difficult to be your friend. Friend. He wonders if she knows how much that word soothes and serrates him. Because they were friends, weren't they? But that feels like so long ago now that it's like a cruel joke as the word tumbles out of her mouth. Well, thank you for saving me, he says, same as always. What are you talking about? I haven't saved you in a long time. Probably owe you one by now, actually. Ochako settles herself on the floor near Izuku and his pile of blankets. She tells herself the proximity is so she can monitor his symptoms and make sure he's warming up. But part of her just wants to be close to him, and she tries to assure herself that's okay. And when he shakes her head at her response, she wonders whether the confusion of hypothermia is setting in. That's not true, he says, you save me all the time. Deku, until a week ago we hadn't seen each other for at least 2 years. And before that, it was mostly only for official Hero Commission events. Why yeah, I know, but, he pauses as a particularly sharp shudder racks his body. But whenever I feel lost or scared, I think about you and I. He swallows. Why is he telling her this? She doesn't need or want to know how pathetically attached to her he still is all this time later. But when he tilts his head to look at her, Ochako is watching him intently, waiting for his answer, and he can't stop himself. I think about that first smile you gave me at UA, the one that said we were friends before we'd even really met. You're the first person who ever looked at me like that. The only one, still. He wonders if, maybe, that is the look Himiko Toga was talking about. Something so genuine and pure and warm in every way it swallows you up in it, a light when you need guidance and a shield when you need protection and love when you need reassurance. You still save me constantly, Uraraka, he finishes, voice soft and eyes looking anywhere but at the woman seated beside him. It's quiet after his admission, which means the angry sounds of the wind and the snow feel loud as they each consider Izuku's words. And Ochako wants to tell him that makes her happy. She wants to say, I'm really glad that helps you. But her tongue is stuck in her mouth as if she's just eaten a whole jar of that gross peanut butter stuff she tried in the States when she visited Melissa's support company last year. Instead, she reaches for the newly refilled compartment of her utility belt and pops it open. Izuku watches her pull something out of it and turn it over in her hands before holding it out. He looks down to see a little All Might Netsuke in her outstretched palm. It looks vaguely familiar, though he's not sure if that's just because it's a piece of All Might memorabilia or because he's seen it before. I got this at our first year Secret Santa exchange, she says, and Izuku's eyes widen when he realizes he has seen it before, and I carried it with me all of first year as a reminder of the kind of hero I wanted to be, the kind of hero you were. She puts the trinket away, stowing it carefully in her belt as she stares down at the floor between them. I stopped carrying it a little while after you left because it hurt to be reminded of you. But, I kept it. All this time, he thinks, all these years, and she held onto a little insignificant keychain he purchased on a whim at a Don Don Donkey. The thought gives him hope he has no right to. He shivers again, a wild uncontrollable contraction of his muscles that makes Ochako frown. She leans forward, pressing her palm to his neck only to pull away when she realizes he is cold as ice, clammy and frozen. She considers their options. When are the others coming? What others? Izuku turns to look at her. They must be sending someone to get us. She shakes her head. Sorry, but you're stuck with just me. His eyes go wide, tongue racing incoherently to form words as his brain screams that she's in danger because of him. That she shouldn't be out here, that she shouldn't be wasting her time or risking her safety for him. Momo could only make the one pair of goggles, she explains. She's been run pretty ragged today, and apparently the technology for both heat and night vision is very complex. I promised her I'd send up a flare in the morning when there will be more light and the weather is supposed to be better, unless we needed immediately assistance. Izuku thinks maybe him sitting mostly naked on the floor should count as immediate assistance. But we have shelter, and I brought enough food and water to get us through, till morning. I don't want anyone else to risk getting lost or sick unless I have to. He is reminded that Ochako has run this entire rescue mission, that she is responsible not only for his safety and her own, but for everyone's. And he suddenly feels very self-conscious about the fact that she's out here with him instead of back at camp making sure her operation runs smoothly. Her chuckle startles him out of his spiraling thoughts. Bakugo wanted to go after you so bad he was so angry when I told him no. Izuku imagines the look on Katsuki's face when anyone told him he couldn't do something he wanted. How did you stop him from doing it anyway? She shrugs. I think, for all his temperamental outbursts, he knows when he's not suited for a job. Without his hearing, he would have probably needed someone to come with him, and I don't think he wanted manga, or anyone else, really, to have to take that risk on his behalf. Izuku hums. Or tries to, anyway, though the sound is a little too high-pitched to be anything but a whine. The crease between Ochako's brows lets him know the sound is worrisome. He wonders how a man with all the power he possesses can still be so worthless that he's forced her to endanger her life, too. When Ochako stands, he doesn't think much of it, just stares straight ahead at the wall, cataloging the dust motes and spider web cracks in the plaster. He can hear her doing something, but he pays it no mind until he feels her standing close. Scoot, she says, and when he looks up at her his whole body seizes with fear and confusion and excitement. Because she is almost naked, standing in front of him in a black sports bra and underwear as she beckons him to open the blankets. He doesn't think it's the cold that sets him stammering, though maybe it's a combination of hypothermia and humiliation that makes it so thoroughly impossible to formulate real, actual words. Uraraka. What AA are you? Ochako wishes, perhaps, she'd worn slightly cuter underwear. The wicking briefs she has on are functional and comfy, but they're not exactly what she would have chosen to wear the first time Izuku saw her mostly naked. Izuku Midoriya is seeing her mostly naked. She wonders if it's too late to use the flare. Momo would forgive her eventually. Because this situation certainly feels like an emergency. A crisis of dignity. Despite the full body flush she knows she's sporting, Ochako calls upon Uravati to keep her voice smooth and level. I am not gonna be the person responsible for Deku freezing to death, so scoot over. Izuku clamps his mouth shut, squeezing his eyes closed. He peels the blankets away from his body, opening them to her. He's still staring at the backs of his eyelids when he feels her slide in beside him, and despite his reservations, his skin all but vibrates when her leg brushes his because she's so warm. Do you mind if we lie down? She asks. I think it'll be easier to keep the blankets on both of us. Sure. Ochako isn't sure how he manages to do it, but somehow Izuku adjusts his position and helps her set up their makeshift bed without ever looking at her. They maneuver the blankets so they're laying on one of the thick wool ones with the end rolled to cushion their heads. They tug the other thick wool covering on top and layer the reflecting space blankets over that. She feels like she's in a microwave and Izuku still has his eyes comically closed. If she weren't so totally mortified herself, Ochako would probably laugh. They turn to face one another, but their eyes are extremely good at looking everywhere but at each other's faces. Izuku lies on his right side, prosthetic arms stick straight along his side over the blankets. In fact, his entire body feels like a pull. He's not sure he could bend any of his joints if he tried. It's as if someone has glued him into place, a perfect life-sized replica of one of the build-your-own Deku model kits that went out last summer. He's still shivering, despite his best efforts to stop himself, and Ochako wonders how to broach the next part of her plan delicately enough not to scare him back out into the snow. Deku, I mean. Izuku looks at her then, finally, and he realizes she's as flustered and nervous as he is. Her cheeks are far darker than usual, and he knows she's just trying to do her best. To be a hero for the person she's trying to rescue. Why yeah, he says, and their bodies move carefully closer as if drawn together by magic. At least, if he thinks of it that way, it's a little easier to deal with. When her knee brushes his thigh, it takes every ounce of restraint Izuku has not to leap out of the safety of the blankets and launch himself into the nearest snowdrift. Because this is Ochako Uraraka and there is no way he's not going to somehow mess this up. Is this okay? She asks, when her hand brushes against his ribs. He nods, and she's grateful because his skin feels like her truck's steering wheel in winter. Deku, you're so cold, why didn't you say something? He just shrugs. I'm fine, really. If you don't want to, That's not what I said, dummy. Once they are sufficiently, and embarrassingly, cuddled together, Izuku's prosthetic arms curls around Ochako's shoulders only for her to yell. Oh, sorry, was that not? Didn't mean. It's fine, she says, mercifully cutting off his rambling. I just didn't expect it to be so cold. Oh, why yeah, I guess. He bites his lip, considering his options. I could take it off. Ochako swallows, unsure of the best response. If you're comfortable. He nods once and then looks her carefully in the eyes. Can you do it for me? I don't think I can reach it like this. Sure, she says, and her stammer has nothing to do with the chilly weather. Izuku stretches the arm out long and instructs her to find the release buttons at the top and bottom of the shoulder joint. She does, pressing her thumbs against them hard at the same moment. She watches as the prosthetic pulls away from his shoulder, the metallic spikes that pierce his skin to hold it in place and help it move fluidly with the rest of his body catch her off guard. Don't these hurt? She asks as she inspects them before carefully laying his arm on the floor behind her. He only shrugs. I've gotten pretty used to it and most of the nerves in my shoulder are so damaged they don't really feel much. The way he delivers that information so detachedly makes her throat constrict. Ochako has to forcefully stop herself from reaching out to touch the puckered skin the prosthetic has revealed, like her fingers could possibly soothe a wound that is years and years old. Does it bother you? He asks, eyes focused totally on her reaction, but revealing none of his own feelings. She misses the boy who couldn't hide his emotions to save his life. She shakes her head. No, it just makes me sad because I don't like seeing you hurt. Ochako wonders if she should have amended that to anyone. I don't like to see anyone hurt. Certainly, it's also true. And it would have been less of a confession of her actual feelings. Too late, though, now, she figures, and so she leaves it at that. Izuku cannot remember ever being this close to Ochako and the sensation is overwhelming. He can smell her, the sweat dried on her skin from the labor she's performed today, and the remnants of smoke from the bonfire she was probably seated beside before she raced into the storm to find him. Her eyelashes are long and dark as they fan out against her cheeks when she blinks, and he's never noticed before, but one of her bottom teeth is very slightly crooked. As his eyes travel lower, he notices the beginning of a scar below her collarbone. It continues down and disappears beneath her sports bra, which Izuku tries very hard not to think about in the slightest. His right arm is trapped awkwardly under his body and he has to strain to reach up and trace the mark with his finger. Ochako shivers and he forces his gaze to remain fixed on the old wound instead of her face. I don't like seeing you hurt, either. This is not the most intimate Ochako has ever been with another person. And certainly, Izuku is not the first man to see the scar on her chest. He's not even the first one to trace it gently with his finger like he's trying to erase it. But somehow, it feels as if he's the only one who matters. Somehow, lying here in this cabin in their underwear feels like the bravest, most audacious thing she's ever done. And she likes it. Emboldened by his touch, Ochako reaches out a hand to push Izuku's hair away from his face. He shivers a little at the contact, but she doesn't think it's from the cold this time. His hair is still damp, though less so, and her fingers get a little tangled in the messy locks as she brushes them back. They both smile as she tugs her fingers free, bashfully chuckling together at the ridiculousness of their current situation. At the prospect of what it could mean. I wish you'd stop running off into danger on your own, she says. I wish you'd just let me help you. I'm sorry, he says. And he means it because Ochako deserves better than to be worried about him all the time, worried about him ever. The only reaction he wants to elicit in her is a smile. Or a laugh. Maybe that look Himiko says his own face when he answered the door to her. Ochako licks her lips, trying to think of something to say to deflect the strange tension between them. I think Commissioner Sukauchi had his meeting with Toga today, she says as she shifts her body carefully, so by the time you're back home, your absolution should be replaying non-stop on every screen. Izuku scoffs. Yeah, he doesn't sound very comforted by the idea. What's wrong? I'm sorry you had to do that, he says, tilting his head down so she can't see his eyes. You shouldn't have gotten dragged into it. I dragged myself in, dummy, I wanted to help. He sighs and the quiet sound of his breath feels like it could knock her over much easier than any of the howling gusts outside. I just feel all this pressure, to be the perfect hero. The commission has very specific guidelines and I don't agree with all of them, but I'm afraid if I don't help keep their reputation upheld. Ochako tries to work out what he's attempting to say. It takes her a moment, sorting through all the headlines and interviews she's seen. The way Deku is always pushing the commission's agenda, even if it doesn't feel like something Izuku would want. And then it hits her with blinding, searing clarity. You're afraid it'll happen again, she says, and he nods, his hair dancing along her forehead with the movement. People need to believe the heroes know what they're doing. They need to believe we're on their side or I'm worried something like the PLF could happen again. Ochako finally understands why he's allowed himself to be tethered to the commission since Shigaraki's defeat. She remembers, of course, the mobs of civilians taking to the streets to protect themselves and their families when they felt like the heroes had abandoned them. She remembers the deaths caused by faulty black market support gear, the innocents caught in the crossfire. So the toga thing. I don't know if my reputation, if the commission's reputation, will survive it intact, he says. Ochako waits for him to look at her, and when he makes no move to do so, she brings her hand back up to his cheek to force him. It's going to be okay, she says, I know it is. And he smiles, then, even if he isn't really sure he believes her. He leans his cheek against her palm and she's glad she's got those silicone covers on her pinkies because otherwise he would have floated himself from the contact. And I'm sorry your name's going to be dragged into it, I never wanted that. You don't have to apologize, Ochako assures him, you didn't do anything wrong. But he shakes his head, I kissed her. Ochako isn't surprised by the admission, but she feels her face blaze all the same as she utters a soft, dumb, oh. I thought. Izuku clenches his eyes shut again, afraid to look at her. I hoped maybe you'd changed your mind. Ochako doesn't know what to say to that. She doesn't know how to tell him she regrets not giving him the right answer. Any answer, really, when he confessed his true feelings in her hospital room. Her mouth feels too dry to form the words, I understand, or, it's okay. Instead, what comes out of her mouth surprises her as much as Izuku. Maybe I did. When his eyes fly open, Ochako is knocked nearly breathless from the life in them. She has to take a moment to reassure herself he hasn't activated one for all because his irises are so bright and vibrant and piercing as they stare back at her. She wonders what he sees in her eyes as she returns his gaze, whether the regret and the certainty and the love swirling within her are obvious to him. She figures maybe they are because he leans forward and presses his lips against hers in a daring gambit to seize the opportunity she's provided him. Both their lips are chapped from the wind, dry and unappealing in every way. But that does not stop them from pursuing the feeling. Neither of them pulls away after the first kiss or the second or the third. Ochako is sweet and warm like brown sugar. And the way her tongue dances with his makes Izuku's heart stutter in his chest like his mouth does when his brain races ahead before he can form the words. He wishes he still had two arms because all he wants to do is pull her closer and one just isn't enough. Ochako threads her fingers through his hair as if she's afraid he'll float away, and she presses her body as close to him as she can possibly be like the additional contact can make up for all the time they've wasted apart. And when they finally break away, her face is more flushed than it's ever been, her lips pinker than he's ever seen them, and their chests brush together while they both attempt to catch their breath. Izuku wonders how Himiko ever fooled him because there is no way, no matter how well she imitated Ochako's country inflection or her hand gestures or her laugh, that she could ever replicate the depth of Ochako's expressive brown eyes, or the empathy reflected in them. I don't want to lose you again, she says, and Izuku shakes his head. You won't. And he knows he will do everything in his power to make sure that is true. No more running off on your own, okay? We do this together. Partners. Friends, he says, and she giggles. Hopefully more than that. He blushes, and he doesn't feel the cold anymore, even though he's sure his skin is still cool under her palms. It doesn't matter. Because she's here with him. Ochako relishes the way Izuku continuously leans into her touch like a starving man who's been given his first meal. She stares into his soft green eyes and she sees the same beautiful, hopeful boy who tripped on his way to the UA entrance exam. The same boy who plummeted from the sky after he used all his power to save her. The same one who broke her heart and then resolved to mend it. She sees every dream Izuku Midoriya has ever had as he stares back at her, a dopey little smile tugging at his mouth, and Ochako Uraraka knows she will always be there to try and stop him from falling, even though sometimes she won't be fast enough. That's okay, though, because she will forever be there to pick him back up when he stumbles. And she knows he'll do the same for her. This is still a fragile, tentative thing they hold between them, a nascent, struggling perennial fighting through the snow to find the sun. But if the daffodils can overcome the winter every year without end, Ochako thinks she can continue fighting for this every day if she has to because it is worth it. There will be time enough to deal with such things tomorrow, though, and the day after that. Deku and Uravati have all the years ahead of them to fix the world together. Every moment of the day can be used for Ochako and Izuku to relearn how to love and support one another. For now, she simply pulls him closer, tangling her legs with him like an anchor. There are still uncertainties to face. Still questions that require answering. But they have their whole lives, yet, to figure it all out. Together. Where stories live. Discover now.